of the things I love and that I was excited that we were talking about this is I was thinking about it when I was just like preparing and thinking about this subject is how each of us, and then even you and I in our dynamic, we have different triggers, or maybe sometimes even the same trigger, but our responses are different. And then what we need is different.
Yeah.
You know, like what we need in that moment to quiet them down is different. And so I like the fact that we're talking about this because I think so many times people will give advice and sometimes I'll hear it and I'll be like, that's the opposite of what I need. Right?
Yeah.
And so it's good to have different perspectives and just talk about what we're going through. And I'm going to be as open as possible about where I'm at right now in every relationship. You're right. But specifically to romantic relationships and dating and what it's like. And then I know like I said, we have similar triggers or we're going through similar things in ways, but what we need in response to them are two totally different things.
Yeah. I love that you started it like that. I think that's the perfect start because it's so true. And depending on the state that you're in too, you might need something different, right? Like, so what I like to do when I'm coaching people and even just with my friends, if I'm being conscious of it, is to say, you know, what are you needing right now? Like, do you need me to just listen? Do you want suggestions? Do you want like full throttle, full blown, like suggestions, advice, like the whole thing? Or what are you needing? And just really listen to what the person's needing in that moment. Because it might be different depending on what state they're in.
Exactly. And that's why I think it's helpful because being friends with you has helped me to better understand that I have to treat people the way they want to be treated and give them what they needed as opposed to like how I would want to be treated and respond because I'm learning like, oh yeah, this isn't universal. This is very different. Because I am someone too that when I am in some type of response, I tend to retreat and want to be alone. And then I'm like, do not like men, like do not come near me. Do not talk to me. Like, I'm not gonna date. Like there's some people that are like exposure therapy, like practice dating. And I'm like, no, that's like the opposite of what I need right now. You know, people have given me that advice where they're like, oh, if you have a fear around it, like it's because you have to practice more and you have to do it more. And I've learned like, it's the opposite of that. I have to just not engage in it at all and let myself like calm down before I try to date again or interact with men in a certain way again.
Yeah. Well, I think, and for you, like you were sharing with me that the more that you kind of, because you were open, you're like, okay, maybe I should go on a date with this person and just be open and see if that, you know, helps me learn in whatever way. Right. But then you were sharing with me that it was getting stronger, like the need to just not was getting louder.
Oh yeah, it was. And now I'm really glad that I'm giving myself that space because the biggest thing I learned from it is that there was multiple parts coming up. And we've talked about this in our episodes. You and I talk about this all the time about like which part of you is coming up right now and how, what do they need? How can you help them? And so I had two parts coming up. One part, he was like this executive type. It's like, just do it, get it over with, practice, like suck it up. And then this other really scared, terrified, like younger part was like, I am not comfortable with this. I'm not okay. And I'm learning to honor both of them in different ways. And now I really did have to take a step back and not kind of gaslight myself or like bully myself into doing things for just, I don't know, whatever sake, or because I see other people doing it. I'll see other people that are like, oh yeah, well, I was scared of it and I just did it. I feel better. And I'm like, well, maybe that's what I need to do. And then, no, we were right. Our gut was right. That was our gut. That was instinctual of we shouldn't be doing this.
Yeah. Yeah. And I love that you brought up the parts element, like part of me wants this, part of me wants that. There's a part of me that's the executive that's like, let's get it done. Let's do this. Let's kind of, you know, make it happen. And then there's the other part that's like this younger, scared part. And that's what I love, that someone's at my door knocking the loudest they've ever knocked in their life. Anyway, that just made me lose my train of thought.
That's okay.
So
Parts.
the parts work, right? So
Mhm.
we've talked about this a little bit before, but internal family systems therapy really dives into that we all have different parts of ourselves, right? And all the time, as humans, as dynamic beings, we have different parts that might need different things. And so creating a space where every part of you is loved and welcome is part of the practice, right? Because if we try to disown a certain part or shove it away make it bad or make it wrong, like if you make the part of you bad that doesn't want to date right now, then it's just going to probably get louder and show up in other ways to try to get more attention versus attuning to that part and being like, hey, I really hear you. I'm going to really listen to you and I'm going to honor where you're at and trust that as I do that, things always shift. So nothing's going to be forever, but just honoring that part, right? And also honoring the executive that's coming in, like wanting to take care of you too, because it's all just protection patterns that we have that are trying to keep us safe. And so, like you said before, mine might show up differently than yours. Mine might look differently than yours. Sometimes we have similar ones. Sometimes they're different. And we talked about it, at length. But for you, like I know for you, you tend to kind of pull back and retreat when you need to. And for me, I've gotten much better at it, but I want more connection. Like I want to go closer. So, but it's funny because you and I we have a great dance. Like I know you. So this is where it's like when you know yourself and you understand yourself and the way that you work, you then have this ability to have compassion for others, even if they show up differently, right? So I understand you so that I never take it personally if you need to pull back, or if I don't hear back from you from a text, like it does not impact me at all because I just know you and your heart, and that's what you're needing right now.
Yeah, and I appreciate that because you're also not someone who pushes me to get out there and date when I'm not ready to, or pressures me in any way as well. And then in the same with reverse with you, when I know that you're activated, it's like I've learned to be like, okay, I mimic some of the stuff that you say, or I ask you like, hey, what do you need? Or just kind of hear you out, or just let you know whether or not I have space. Like, because you're also really good at it too, where you're like, oh, it's fine. I'll like call somebody else. Like, I can't talk about this right now. Like, hey, if you're activated too, like I get it. But I also know when you need more connection of like, just, hey, yep, get out all your thoughts. What is it you want to say? How is it? Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, yeah, sure.
Yeah.
Like, send me it, like involve me. Like, what would you want to say to this person? Or how do you feel about it, and get more into it? And it's been nice because then we're learning.
Mm-hmm.
Our partner's not going to be exactly like us either, right? So
right, we get to
we're
practice.
learning how to relate. Yeah. And then how to deal with that or work through that with our friends so that we're not necessarily having to go to other people or other partners all the time as well. And like we're just expanding our support networks, And I'm really glad when you were talking about honoring the different parts, because that is definitely one thing that I personally have struggled with is I'll shame one part, glorify another, and then the battle comes out, its battle goes internal. And I love that you mentioned that it would keep getting louder and louder until like you really hear it. And that is exactly what happened, Jess. Like, I went on and I just kept being like, yeah, yeah, yeah. And it kept getting louder and louder and louder. And then finally, when it wasn't going away, I'm like, oh, yeah, this is something I need to address. And I hear you. And then not shaming it and being like, no, I love you. I love that you don't want to date right now. I love that you have these fears coming up. Like, I love you for this. It's totally okay. Because it's funny. I have, like you mentioned, the parts want to protect you. The parts also want to give you what you desire, right? So I have these parts of me that are like, but wait, but we know you want a relationship. We know you want a family. We know you want all these things. Let's get it, right? So they're trying to be super supportive too and like get me to where I want to be. And then the other parts are like, wait, no, this is too fast. We need to protect you too soon. So it is, this internal conflict. But it's been nice to take a beat and then talk to you about it and talk to Joe and talk to other friends and look into it and really sit with like, okay, what is coming up, and like take a pause and before
Mhm.
I dabble again. And guys will like ask me out or try and talk to me, and I can feel myself like get all excited and everything again. And then I'm like, wait, before we just jump in again, we never actually dealt with the thing that came up that we should probably deal with at first before we like start this cycle and pattern all over again.
Yeah, the good news is that life will just keep being our teacher. So whatever,
Good news now.
some of us like to take, the long route to things.
It's like
Like,
it's up.
yeah, maybe I'll try this again. Or maybe for me, it's been challenging for me to take a break, right? And I took a long break for me, which was, a few months off of connecting with men and relating to men, and took a break from the person that I was seeing to go like fully into SLA program and like do the work there. And now I'm like, okay, I've had a lot of shifts. I feel really, really ready. And, you know, life is mirroring back to me places that, I still have some more work to do around like really honoring my desire and really deeply trusting the timing of how it's unfolding. And then most of all, just not taking things so personally that I internalize if someone is not maybe able to show up in the way that would be able to meet me, not making that about me and something wrong with me, which is like one of my deepest, most challenging lessons and triggers in this life.
No, that I think that will resonate with so many people
Yeah.
because it is extremely difficult to not take other people's responses personally.
Mm-hmm.
And you're right about the teacher thing. It's like, I was just arguing. It's so funny. I wish you were a fly on the wall because I feel like you would have loved the conversation I had with Joe, where I said to him, I go, but if God wants me to feel wanted and loved and enough, why am I experiencing this rejection again so that I feel unwanted and unloved and not enough? That's just reinforcing my belief. Why
Mm-hmm.
wouldn't he show me more situations where I'm feeling wanted, loved, and enough?
Mm-hmm.
Right? I'm like, this seems like the opposite of what needs to happen. And like, what is this? This is not what I need right now. I was totally battling reality and like, I couldn't see it. I was in it. I was activated.
Mm-hmm.
And he
Yeah.
was so kind and so patient and he was good about it. But I just know that you and I have had those similar talks before of like how difficult it is when that story is coming up
Mm-hmm.
to not take what's happening in the physical reality as more evidence that this story,
Yeah.
this belief is true. It is so
Right.
hard. That is
Yeah.
the battle.
That's it. And our beliefs perpetuate their own selves, right? So this is the wild thing of how much perception is reality, is that when something happens, and you and I have talked about, a lot of times rejection isn't even rejection. It's like perceived rejection.
Yeah.
Because, you know, maybe the person opposite us isn't able to be with what comes up for them in the relationship, right? What's mirrored to them. Like it can be very confronting.
Yeah.
And so a lot of times it doesn't even have much to do with you or me or who. It's like we're meeting ourselves in each person that we relate to. So same thing for us with our triggers coming up doesn't have much to do with the other person either, but we learn through the mirror of these relationships, but our beliefs perpetuate themselves. And so if we've had experiences that have, and, starting when we're really, really tiny, traumatic experiences that have created this imprinting around whatever it is, like I'm not lovable, I'm not worthy, I'll never have what I want. It happens for everyone else, doesn't happen for me. All of that track becomes more and more grooved in the more we find evidence to support it throughout life, right? So the wild thing is there's all kinds of love available, right, for both of us. And one of my challenges has been like really focusing on that rather than like this one place where it hasn't quite aligned yet and using that as evidence, right?
You're so true. It's so true. And that's what you're saying is how I've been kind of viewing what a trauma response would be, especially when we're talking about emotional trauma.
Mhm.
Or I should say any type of trauma that's resulted in, then the result is emotional trauma. So, and which is kind of everything, right? Because then we hold
Mhm.
these beliefs. And so these trauma responses that come up when we're in any type of relationship, because that's what relationships do, is they're going to mirror back our beliefs and they're going to mirror back where we're at for that to come up so then we can process it and heal it. And
Yeah.
hopefully with the person that is triggering us so that there could be like real connection and like harmony, you know.
Mhm.
But it is interesting because I view it as what when there's this response coming up, this activation. And I like
Mhm.
using the word activation because it's activating my nervous system, but it's also activating that belief system. And
Yeah.
then what happens is it activates that belief, and then I in turn act a certain way because now it's like a whole
Yeah.
it's like a program is now running.
Yes. Yes.
And then I act out a certain way based on how that program comes in. So I view it as this trauma response as a code, this embedded code. And
Mhm.
the moment there's a certain word or an action that like turns the code on, I'm like, dun-dun. Like I
Yep.
then become like the program's running now, and that's the software that's embedded. And it's our job, if we want to move past it, is to learn how to rewrite that code,
Mhm.
learn how
Mhm.
to work through that response and rewrite it so that the next time that same situation occurs, we're not activating the same way,
Yeah.
or the action that happens is different because we rewrote the code. So now it's going to
Mhm.
be different.
Yeah.
And that's why it's helpful having people like you, and Joe in my life that I learned how to rewrite the code. I learned how to not have the same response and give a new response, a new option.
Yeah, yeah. Oh my gosh, so much of what you said. So yeah, the when the trigger happens, right? My mentors say it's like off to the races,
Yeah.
right? It's like off to the races because we are then triggered. So the subconscious belief or the initial wounding is triggered that area in the brain. And
Hmm.
so then the protectors come up, like the fierce protectors come up. And it's off to the races because our rational brain, our logical brain is offline. Our prefrontal cortex, where we can think rationally and speak rationally, and is offline. And so we're operating just from survival mode in fight, flight, freeze, and fawn. And so that's where people, when you say, like, I lost my mind, like you actually lost your mind. You did, because there's been studies done where they do brain scans of these moments happening, and this part of the brain is offline. And it's the operating limbic system is operating and firing. And that's why when we come back to center, we think, oh my gosh. And a lot of times we can spiral into shame because it's like, how could I have shown up that way? How could I have said this? How could I have done this? Right? Like, that's not who I am. It's like, no, it's not. It's not who you are at your essence. But when you're triggered and your survival is coming up, you're trying to survive in any way you can. So sometimes it's to fight, and sometimes it's to flee, and sometimes it's to shut down, and sometimes it's to go into like people pleasing fawn mode, like as long as you're okay, then I know I'm okay. So let me just abandon my own self to make sure you're okay. And it's really real, and it can be really strong. And something that I was just listening to right before this, which was so helpful, was talking about beliefs and how they perpetuate themselves, number one, and number two is the way that we heal this is, a couple of things. We want to be able to learn to create a space between the trigger and the reaction, right? So Viktor Frankl, who's like one of my faves of all time, who wrote the book Man's Search for Meaning, he talks about in between a stimulus and a response, there's a space. And in that space lies our freedom, right? So initially, you might find that the stimulus happens and you react right away, and there's absolutely no space. This work helps us to create a little bit of a space. And even if we have 2 seconds, 5 seconds, a minute, it's like enough time to, okay, I'm triggered in this moment. I realize that I'm going to be operating from a place that's not probably how I want to show up. And so the more of a space we can create, and it's like building a muscle, right? The more freedom we have within that space to choose differently. And then we rewire as a
Mm.
result. But the thing that I hear people say all the time, right, is like, I don't want to get triggered in my relationship. I just don't want to be triggered in relationship. And I'm like, good luck. Like, you better go find a mountaintop to sit on top of and be away from all humans, because that's never going to happen. But some of the things that used to trigger you so severely will become less and may even dissipate completely. The deeper ones, like the ones that I was mentioning for me, are like rejection and abandonment. Like it's just the worst, the most painful, complete hijack, you know? Those ones are harder. And those are the ones where you will, if you're lucky enough to have, you know, a friend like I do in Teal, where we can practice with each other, or a relationship or a partner that's willing to do the work with you. Oh my gosh, the freedom, the alchemy, the healing that can take place when you have ruptures and then you repair them. It's mind blowing. And, you know, we're never going to not have challenges or triggers or conflict. That's not how it is. But learning how to navigate things in a different way, in a more loving, conscious way, is what brings more peace, more connection, more healing. So that's what I'm super passionate about, in case you can't tell.
That was amazing. Like everything I'm like, it's so true that it really is in that pause. And that's why, as I've been going on this journey and what I've been learning in my own 12-step programs, and I know that you've been learning in it too, because that's what they emphasize is like pause, like don't act yet, kind of, because it's not always true where time is a factor, but it can be when we're talking about being in the limbic system. It takes a certain amount of time to come back online. Sometimes it's quicker than others. You could be in it for a while. You could be in it just like, then you're out, but you don't quite know. But chances are, if you do give yourself a little break and allow like the cortisol and everything to relax, so you're going to come out of it quicker. Instead of acting and then ramping it up and staying in it. But I'm so glad that you talked about being out of your mind and not acting like yourself and explaining all of this, because this is how you can navigate in a healthy way for both you and, like you said, whoever's opposite you, whether a romantic partner, a friend, a family member. When you're doing the steps, and when I mean steps, I mean the next right thing. So when you're doing the next right thing, when you're in this mode and you're taking that moment to pause, you are making sure that the other person also feels like safe and understand. So it's like, it's this win-win. And then it's where the co-healing happens. Because you've seen, it's like we constantly are in relationships with people that we're going to activate and trigger each other based on what each other needs to. So sometimes these opposites attract.
Oh yeah.
People will talk about the avoidant and the
all the time.
Yeah, they attract. That's what I think people mean with like opposites attract. They attract and then they like trigger each other. And it can be really beautiful when you have that co-healing that can happen, because then both are healing. And so like some people might be used to, like, for example, like you and I, right? My initial thing would want to be to run away and abandon. But I've learned, hey, that's going to activate you. So I need to continue to show up and connect. You're going to need a little bit of level of connection. Me, I'm going to be worried about someone's going to want too much connection. And so that's going to activate me. And then you're like, okay, cool. I'll get enough and we're good. But I'll also pull away. So it's that. And then we both are co-healing, where we're like, wait, you're going to give me what I need and I'm going to give you what you need. Wait, we can respect each other's boundaries and needs. Whoa, that's new for me. So that's where the co-healing can happen. But it only happens when we're both able to like pause and like take a moment and remember, oh, okay. Because it's so wild. And I don't know about you, but for me, one thing I struggle with is emotional permanence. And for people that don't understand what that is, it's, I don't remember that people are going to continue to love me. Or how they're going to keep feeling about me. So if they're not telling me, or if they're not always showing that, I'll be like, oh, they're just going to up and leave and they're not going to love me anymore. And I really do believe that like one little thing could like, we'll just not love. And so that's my fears that come up too. So I do, it's funny because like we do both have fears of abandonment. Even though, like I said, the different reactions to it, we'd still have the same trigger of like, oh my
Mhm.
God, this person's going to abandon me.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right? But the emotional permanence is tough. And so that's another reason why I pull away, is because I assume the person's just like going to
Yeah.
stop loving me. I'd rather pull away and not have them say it
Yeah.
or not have them show it to me. And then I convince myself like we're better off alone. Like we're just
Yes.
going to be alone.
Yes. Oh, you articulated that so beautifully. And it's really interesting. I mean, yeah, the opposites do attract. The energies are interesting, right? So I can lean like more anxious, you can lean more avoidant, but the attachment styles are not fixed, right? And it's much more nuanced than that. So I feel, yes, this information is helpful, but now people are becoming hyper focused on like attachment styles.
Right?
And that's not actually helping either, because it's more nuanced, right? But like you said, to have an understanding of the dance, because it's a dance, right? So every relationship, there's a dance. Every couple has a dance. And so whenever I meet with couples, I'm like, okay, walk me through your dance. Like every couple has a dance. What does it look like? Like when you guys have challenges, walk me through. Like she says this person says this is how this goes. It's the same every time, because we're playing out our trauma with the person in front of us. And just by design, we tend to pull in the energy, the avatar in another human of exactly what it is we need to heal. So it's like spiritual sandpaper is what my mentor would say, Santos, who you just met. He's like, it's like spiritual sandpaper. I know he's the best, the best. So we come together as this spiritual sandpaper. And it's really interesting because I was explaining to my client yesterday, because she was like, I think I've always wanted more connection from my husband, and he's always kind of been pulling away, and I don't. And I was like, do you know how normal that is? Like, it's like that's just how it is. But you explained it so beautifully, because I personally, it took me years to understand that the person who's avoiding is actually having a similar experience. Like also, like you said, also maybe a fear of abandonment. And the coping is such that it's like, okay, instead of going toward, like the more anxious person will go toward to want to connect, to regulate. The avoidant will want to pull away to regulate. But it's a similar experience of like, am I going to be abandoned? I'm going to leave before you leave me, protection, right? So it's not that the avoidant person doesn't care. And a lot of the work around attachment styles, I feel like it doesn't give a lot of love to the avoidant patterns. It's like, oh, it's an avoidant. Like, well, and I have the blessing of having experienced both sides. So I know what it feels like to be avoidant as well. Like I've had moments where it's like, it's too much, too fast, too much closeness. And I'm like, and so all of it is just protection. So, and each, depending on what the situation needs, is how you have to navigate it, because it can be so easy to say, oh yeah, we just need to pause. Oh, let's just pause, right? Good luck when you're like triggered and one person coming toward the other and the other one's running away, and it's like off to the races, right? So each situation is going to be different, but generally speaking, if the person who's more avoiding could say to the one who's more anxious, like, okay, obviously we're both triggered. Whoever's saner at the time, that saying, like whoever's saner at the time, this is what they're talking about. So whenever you realize that one or the other of us is triggered, very soon after, the other person will be triggered too, because you're picking up the energy of the trigger, right? So if we realize that, if we can say, okay, like, I love you, I care about this relationship. Right now, I'm not in the place where I can connect in the way that's needed. So I need to take some space, but I'm coming back, right? The avoidant person, like I'm coming back. And then the anxious one is going to have to sit with that disconnection of like, okay, for now they need to go. They're having this same experience that I'm having. We're all dysregulated. So that space and compassion goes a long, 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 long way. And when I teach couples this, they're pretty good. Like it's simple, but it's not easy because of what it brings up. So the more, trauma and things that you have, the more challenging it's going to be. But also the greater the reward when you learn how to navigate and regulate. And I've seen absolute miracles where like people used to kind of like block the door and like stand and not let someone leave, to be like, okay, like you need to leave. I hear you. I understand. And maybe call a friend or just sit with their trigger or whatever. So this work really does work. And the whole point of it is more freedom, just freedom within yourself and relating to another. But that's so big because these things can just like hijack us, you know?
Oh yeah, I love so much of what you said. And I'm so glad, very grateful actually that you talked about having compassion for the more avoiding person because I mean, I don't know if you remember how I was when we first met too, like in program. I was way more anxious when it came to
Mm.
the, like I lean both. I lean both.
Yeah,
It
yeah.
really depends. I've become more avoiding. And again, it depends on what is coming up, like what
Yes.
the trigger is. So I'm in this state right now currently where my OCD has come up really bad and sexual trauma from my past has been, coming up because it wants to be dealt with. And that's when I become super avoidant.
Mm-hmm.
That's when I'm like, I need my space.
Mm-hmm.
But when I'm not in that space and I'm dating and then I connect a lot with a person and I'm like really in it and I'm like, oh my goodness, I really like this person. And
Mm-hmm.
then they pull away a little bit, I become super anxious and I lean in a lot and I need the connection. I need the reassurance. Like
Mm-hmm.
when I'm really into somebody, I tend to be more anxious leaning.
Yeah.
So it's just, again, it's like depends on, and when they're pulling away, I'm leaning forward. And that's not
Yeah.
always, there's some people that pull away and I go, okay. And I pull away too. Like, again, it depends on what's coming
Mm-hmm.
up. So I'm glad you said that because I agree. I think it's important to recognize when we're in either state and that can be helpful, but I do get frustrated when people just label themselves as like, oh,
Yeah.
I'm this or I'm
Yeah.
that, because it really does depend on the relationship and it depends on where we're at and it depends on
Mm-hmm.
what's coming up and what we need
Mm-hmm.
in that moment. That's why for me, parts work was more important because my different parts are different um, attachment types. So when
Mm-hmm.
one's becoming activated, then that's when I'm more anxious. One's more avoidant, right? So that's why I really like the parts work. So I'm really grateful that you said that because I used to really demonize avoidant people.
Me
And
too.
then when I found myself becoming more of that way and then understanding what was going
Mm-hmm.
on inside of me and why I wanted more space or why I wanted less connection, then I was like, oh,
Mm-hmm.
I had way more compassion because I recognized the thoughts that were coming up, the stories that were coming up, the traumas that were coming up of why I wanted that. And I just had way more compassion. And then I'm like,
Mm-hmm.
and then I
Mm-hmm.
recognized too that when people gave me that space and they let me feel how I was feeling, then I actually went toward them twice as hard and connected twice as hard after I got that time
Yeah.
because I trusted them more. And
Yes.
then the people that didn't give that to me, that didn't give me my space to allow whatever response I was having to subside, they're the ones that I wanted to disconnect from even more. So it's
Mm-hmm.
kind of funny how
Mm-hmm.
I realized that, like, the more space people gave me, the more than drawn to them I was and wanted to be like closer with them. And that's why you and I have gotten closer and closer and
Mm-hmm.
closer, and the same with Joe and stuff. And then the people that just kept pushing, pushing, pushing and wouldn't respect my space, I am like, I want nothing to do with you.
Yeah. Yeah.
So if you are someone who is more anxious leaning and you're watching this, and maybe the person, like I said, whoever it is in your life is becoming avoidant, this might be true for them too. I'm not saying it's an absolute,
Mm-hmm.
but just speaking as someone who that happens with, it is funny how my deepest relationships are with the people that let me just have that pulling back response and don't take it personal because it's not. Like
Yeah.
it's very rarely personal. The only time it's personal is when someone is just disrespecting my boundaries over and over again. And then I like shut down and but other than that, it is 9 times out of 10, it is because of something that's come up that I don't quite know how to articulate yet. And that's usually what it is for me,
Mm-hmm.
it's I don't quite understand the feeling yet. And I don't
Mm-hmm.
quite understand what I'm going through. So I need disconnection to fully understand what's happening to me. And then once I have, oh, that's what's going on, I come back and I'm like, hey, by the way, this is what
Yeah.
happened and what came up. And And that's because I was so used to enmeshment all the time in relationships
Right.
that I
Yeah.
get clouded. I get this cloudedness of, is this my feeling? Is this person? Am I reacting because of them? What am I reacting? There's a lot of confusion. And
Mhm.
so again, it depends on the response, right? Sometimes the reason I want to pull away is fear of abandonment. Other times the reason I want to pull away is just some clarity
Mhm.
because I'm
Yeah.
just confused. And so this is where, therapy, doing the work and inner exploration can really help
Mhm.
because we start to understand ourselves better. And
Yeah.
then we learn how to articulate and how to tell our partners and our friends, hey, this is what's going on. This is what I need.
Mhm. Yeah, completely. And part of too, I mean, again, going back to like, okay, are we ever going to fully heal from our triggers and show up as this like, Buddha on the mountaintop? Like, probably not, right? But if we can show up taking full responsibility for it, like, and it's not, it's never our fault that we have these initial triggers and traumas, but now it's like, well, they're here, like they're here now. So can we use them as a vehicle for our own healing because they're here? And being really responsible. So just owning it, right? So now, even now, when my rejection, abandonment stuff gets triggered, I mean, it's wild because my like adult self, talking about parts, my adult self is like, oh yeah, this is that moment where you're going to perceive this to be exactly the same as it was, before. And I still haven't identified the original trauma. So I think it was like pre-verbal before I could even talk probably. But this like rejection abandonment thing, when it gets triggered, it is so powerful. But my adult, healthy self is like, oh, this is what's happening. And I'm in the trigger. And it's like a grooved in road on like in my brain where it's like that neural network is just so grooved in from so many experiences like that it's like feels as though this is what is actually happening. Right. And there's nothing anyone can say that could, guide me in a different direction. But what this work has given me is a little space, enough space to be like, hold on, like this isn't black and white. It's more nuanced. So yes, I'm having the experience of rejection and abandonment. That is true. That's the experience that I'm having. However, there's more nuances here. So can we bring in the nuances instead of being like, yep, same evidence of the same story. This is just going to keep happening over and over again. It's hopeless. I'm helpless. There's no way out. Right. But that's trauma brain. When you start to sound like that within your mind, just know that is the trauma track that's trying to keep you safe. So it's like, see, and I hope I can articulate this properly, but the thing I was listening to right before was talking about there's a little tiny bit of safety in that pain because it's familiar, right? As miserable as it feels, we know it well and it's familiar. If we're open to having a new belief, what if then we have the new belief and then we get let down, then we're really screwed, right? So it's almost like, well, this misery is like a comfortable misery, but I know it. Versus like, what if I allowed myself to create a new meaning? And obviously in that moment of the trigger, that's not when that's going to happen. Right? In that moment, we're in survival. We're literally surviving. But later, when you have a little bit of space, and this is where like coaching, therapy, different modalities, plant medicine has helped me a lot, like can help us to have a little bit of space to then like, what if there's another possibility here that I haven't seen yet? Because there is. It's not black and white. It's not this or this. Like there's like a whole range of different options, opportunities, things that can unfold, right? But in our brain and our black and white thinking, that's going to be a cognitive distortion of like, oh, it's either this or this, and that's it.
Yeah, and I love that you called it distortion because that's exactly what it is. It's
Yeah.
a filter gets activated, and then it's like I laugh if I can click the side of my phone 3 times and a red light filter comes up, and then everything I'm looking at looks distorted because it looks like it's a totally different color. I'm like, well, I'm like looking at something, oh, this is purple. And you're like, Teal, it's blue. And I'm like, no, you sent it to me. I'm looking through it. It's purple. It's like, yeah, I have a red filter on my phone. So it's going to look different.
Mm-hmm.
And so, but then I click it 3 times and it's off. And I'm like, wait, oh, that's it. That's
Yeah.
the code. And that's exactly how I feel like what happens with the trauma
Yes.
response and the trauma brain. It's like me clicking my phone 3 times on the side, activating that filter, and then everything I see on it. And I could be arguing with you, being like, Jess, it's purple. I'm looking at it right now. And you're like,
Yeah.
I'm looking at it too. It's blue. And then
Yeah.
I'm like, oh, oopsies.
Mm-hmm.
And
I
that's
love that.
like that's exactly how I feel like what happens when someone's activated, they're in a trauma response.
That is what happened.
Because it is true to them.
Mm-hmm.
You
Yes.
know? And that's why my favorite saying in Round Truth that I heard someone say is that the truth isn't what, it's when.
Mm.
And so the truth is going to be different depending on when it's happening too.
Oh,
So
yeah.
like the present tense, what's happening right now is true because I am looking at something on my phone. Like say we're on the phone and so we can't see what each other's looking at. And I'm like, Jess, I'm looking at it on my phone right now. It's purple.
Mhm.
And you're like, what? But I'm looking at, we're both right. We're both right.
Yes. Yes. Thank you for that.
We're both right at the same time.
Yes.
And the moment I unclick it, I'm like, oh, wait. And then I could show you mine. You're like, oh, I see how that's different. But it's hard because we have no clue. We're looking at different phones. And so
Yes. Yeah.
it can be difficult sometimes to even recognize that we're in that state, right? So we don't always know that we're as triggered as we are. And it's funny. I wanted to just come back to one thing that you said when you were talking about whoever's like more sane in that situation. I did want to recall there was something that happened recently where, and this is where phones are tough because when you're not face to face, you have no clue the situation that's happening when you're with somebody. So you and I were having a conversation and you had no idea the conversation that I was having with my mom at the time that really activated about a situation. And so you're talking to me about something related to that. And my response was just like totally from this super activated place of like, and we start to get into like a little bit of an argument. And it's interesting because in that moment, I had the red filter on. I was seeing red. Everything was just so activated that I didn't even recognize. I personally didn't even recognize that I was in this state with you. Even though you were also activated, you recognized it. And it was funny. The response was, maybe we shouldn't be talking about this. What was so cool about that is it was exactly the sentence I needed to show me the state I was in to then activate my prefrontal cortex. In that moment when you sent that to me and I looked at it and I went, oh my gosh, I am in. Whoa. And it pulled me out of it, clicked off the filter, and then I could see clearly. And then my response was like, I apologize, right? I was able to almost say like apologize. I'm like, oh my God, I'm so sorry that I just did that. But so it is cool again, how because of how much we've done with our relationship, we're able to go there and do it and then repair so quickly. And so again, anyone that's listening to this that isn't sure how this could actually work out, that's what happens. When you cultivate these relationships, when you have this staying power, this patience and longevity with another person, you're willing to continue to connect. Like you and I have made a commitment to each other to like continue to work through it. We're not just going to like bail, right? We're continuing to work through it. And that's really special, right? Like that's how I'm able to see how I'm wanted and loved as well. And not just as a friend. And in that, that's how we're learning to heal. And you're helping me snap out of it quicker, right? And I'm helping you feel more understood. So and like not be like, hey, I'm not going anywhere. Like I'm still here. Right? I'm sure. I don't know. I think you said this to me, so unless I'm remembering wrong, but I'm pretty sure you didn't expect me to even apologize that quickly. So it's just like,
no, I was like, I didn't, but there's so much of what you said that was so important, but especially talking about the filters, right? Like it is absolutely 1,000,000% valid that you're having the experience that you're having, right? That is your reality. In that moment, that filter is on and that is your reality. And mine was on too in that moment, and mine was my filter. And so we're both trying to engage with each other through, like, we're basically time traveling and confusing each other for past people and energies and experiences, right? Doesn't mean that what's happening in the moment isn't happening and that's also happening, but it's intensified because of the past, right? But it was such a beautiful, because my mind still is like, oh, well, there goes that. Like, she's not gonna be my friend, right? Like in my trauma brain, I'm like, and it's like, but we were able to, I used what I had in that moment, which wasn't like my rational brain, but it was enough to be like, I think we're both activated. Let's take a beat, right? Like, I said some things before that I probably would have rather not said, but I did, but then I was like, okay, yeah. But then it's really beautiful because you get to practice in safe relationships, right? And both of us have had a lot of relational trauma in various different forms and types. And so it can be really scary to be vulnerable. And we absolutely must learn how to create space for both people's experiences, right? Even if you don't agree. Like, even if which now I wouldn't say this, but like, if I was like, Teal, that's wrong. Like, you're seeing it. No, you're not. That doesn't work. It's like, this is your experience and it's valid. This is my experience and it's valid. They may be different experiences. And then like, it's interesting because a nuance is we could still be having a similar experience, but like through different lenses. So there's nuances to it. But the point and one of the biggest parts of conscious relating is like creating space for all of it. Like, space for you, space for me, space for our relationship. And what does the relationship itself need right now, right? Like, independent of like each person. And so this is why, I mean, one of the couples that I study and I love so much, Sister Shanti and Eisen, who are like in Sacred Union Partnership, they talk about like the Holy Trinity and how like the top of it, and you might need to correct me on this because you know me and like this kind of talk, I might get it wrong, but like this is God. Like, the top of the pyramid and the Holy Trinity is God. And then this is like me and you, for example, right? Or like the partnership. So if you're both connected to God and you're more committed to, your connection to yourself and love and God, whatever you call God, whatever that is to you, the relationship has a much better chance of flowing and being safe and being okay. And the beautiful thing is like safety and connection is born through ruptures and then repairing it, because now we know, like, we've had a couple things come up and now, I mean, I feel like, okay, if something comes up with us, like, we're going to work it out.
Same. Like, yeah. I'm not concerned because my mind immediately goes to, I guess I just lost another friend, or I guess we're not. And Joe was the first person to help. Well, my brother was when I moved out here. Joe, friend-wise, was the first person to help me with that when we would like get into an argument or I would be prickly with him. That's the word he likes to use. I think.
I like that.
Right, like I'm a porcupine or something. And then I would, we would get off the phone and then he would call me up immediately and be like, hey, what just happened? Can we talk about it?
Yeah, he's awesome.
I'm not used to that. And then with us too, one of the things that I'm not used to as well, and why when you said that, it snapped me out of it, is I'm used to having to argue with someone and get into an argument.
Yeah.
And I'm just used to that. And then they repair. So I'm used to getting into these like heated arguments with people. And then it gets so heated that then we get to the emotional meat of it and the truth comes out and then we repair. That has been my like pattern, or what I've seen with certain friends, especially like one of my closest girlfriends that I'm unfortunately not friends with anymore. That's what would happen, where it would be like, there would be this kind of like edge between us and we would start to argue. And then I would be able to tell like, this isn't really what's going on. There's something else. You're being prickly with me for another reason. She'd be like, no, this is what I really feel. And I'm like, but I can tell it's not. And we'd have to get into this insane, super intense argument. And then finally one of us would be crying and it would come out like, I'm just really upset about such and such.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
It had nothing to do with the argument. Right. And so that is how I'm used to relating with people.
Oh yeah.
That is so I remember, and I just love this instance in particular, because this really is an instance that woke me up and really did a lot of repair, because it was, I remember what was happening at that moment. And that really was what was going through my head of like, I need to, because I didn't know how to express exactly what was happening. that it's like, I need to just get into this argument and be so intense and fight and then explain what's going on, right?
Mhm.
And that didn't happen. Instead, you were like, oh, okay, maybe we like, because I'm used to people forcing so much connection, right? That we have to fight. So then when you were like, maybe we should take a beat and like, this doesn't seem helpful. We like should discuss this right now. I was like, oh someone's giving me space to figure out.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
There it was. And I'm like, oh,
Huh.
snapped me out of it, right?
Yeah.
So it was so cool. And then I had to learn, like, I don't need to get into an intense argument.
Mm.
I can actually say, hey, I don't know if I'm in a place to talk about this right now. Let me figure out how I'm feeling and come back. Because that was never an option for me to
Right.
say.
Yes.
So I just engage anyway.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
so it gave me that option. It just woke me up. And so that's why I look at that situation, because it was so healing to recognize
Wow.
I'm in this state, I'm in this response, and I can choose differently, because so much of what happens and why I pull back and avoid is I don't think things are an option for me.
Mhm.
I don't think that I can say something and that my boundary is going to be respected, or that people are going to listen to me, or they're going to meet my needs. So I'd rather just leave first, or argue and make that, you know what I mean, have them leave and whatever. So yeah, that's why I love bringing up that situation, because it too made me realize that there's very little, like, it would take an extreme circumstance to come between you and I. You just know how to repair now. And then it was cool because it snapped me out of it to where I was like, oh wait, I don't want to get into an argument with Jess right now. Yes. Wait, I'm sorry. Like
Yeah, that surprised me. I was like, oh, whoa, she apologized. I was like, that was fast. But that makes
because
sense.
anger's scary, you know, like I get scared when people are angry at me. And then I'm like, well, wait, I don't want Jess to be tiptoeing around me and for me to take my anger out on her that has nothing to do with you, right? I explained later what was going on, so you understood where I was activated. And so it's like, yeah, this isn't about you. This is about something else that's going on.
Right.
Get out on you. And that's how I learned. I learned to take anger and emotions out on other people, as opposed to just saying how I was really feeling and what I was going through. I would like project.
Yeah. And what you mentioned is really important too. Like, just if you don't trust that you can say to somebody like, I need a minute, or maybe you don't even recognize that you need a minute in the moment, right? Then it makes sense to create like a conflict or an argument, because then that naturally creates space, right? So if we're, and if even just if we're triggered by closeness, like it can be part of our protection is like, oh, I'm going to create, like subconsciously create an issue or an argument so that then I can get my need met of space. So it's interesting because I just recognized that we were both like, I was saying things that I'm like, okay, I feel like these things are true, but actually they're probably not. I'm just so activated right now. And then I was noticing like we were just bouncing off of each other. And so I'm like, hold on, let's just take a minute. But in that, you got your need met, right? And so isn't that amazing? And this is why I think Ram Dass says, like, I can do nothing for you but work on myself, and you can do nothing for me but work on yourself. And that is absolutely true, because imagine you're opposite someone who hasn't really done much work on themselves or doesn't understand these things. They are going to think it's you. Even if they sometimes in the moment, I'm like, it's them and they're doing this. And like, I'm very convinced, right? But the more we do our work on ourselves and know ourselves, the more we have like a kaleidoscope of different things to know ourselves and how we show up and our patterns. And so we can identify them. And that creates the space to have compassion for ourselves, for the other. And so that's really the work of relating. That's why it's like, whether, even if you're in a relationship, like if only you want to do the work and your partner's not really ready yet, still do the work, because it can change the whole dynamic. It's really profound what can happen when one person shows up. But when you have two, oh my gosh, like, because I know you're doing everything you can to learn and heal and grow, and God knows I am too. And so we gravitate together in that energy, which is another topic that could be probably a whole podcast, but like attracts like in that way too. And that's why I love Joe too. Joe should come on, because we talk about him all the time. He should come on.
I know. I don't even know if he realizes it. I do tell him. He loves it. Once I figure out how to add more people to this.
Yeah. Then we'll bring them on.
Or maybe you and I can be in the same
Oh,
location.
yeah.
That's one. Because I would also love to have my friend Wendy on. We used to be married to brothers, and her and I just got so close and doing the work together. And we're both dating again, but it's trauma responses. So we talk all about this stuff. She's such a whiz when it comes to talking about trauma and what happens in relationships and dating. She's funny. So we'll definitely have her on soon too, because she's helped me a lot. She's another person.
Yeah.
There's been times of repair and just discussing things, and I'm glad that you brought up too of people maybe creating arguments or creating discord because they don't know how to ask for space. So then they just cause an issue and ask for it. And there it is again. Something is activated in them. Some type of trauma response is activated. And because they haven't learned yet or don't feel safe yet to express what they need, there's a reaction. And then that causes some type of, discord in the relationship or rupture. Like you said, I love that.
Yeah.
But just like we're talking about, when you have this consciousness in any relationship, and I'm having it with my mom right now, which has been deeply healing. I didn't even realize how much, I didn't think it was possible. And I think this is a gift of my own sobriety and a gift of doing the steps and stuff like that too. Because honestly, what you had just talked about with showing up in a relationship, you don't know how it's going to affect it. She's actually said this to me. That's why I can say it was because I started showing up differently. That then she started responding differently, and now is showing up differently as well. And hey, this doesn't always happen. I've lost people. People left my life because I started showing up differently. So that happens too. So I don't want to say this to be that's not true for me, right? Because I know your own situations, but it's different people. Just this person happens to be my mother that it's happening with. But it's because I started taking away the resentments and did some of the work and recognizing my own stuff and then saying what I needed. And then in turn, she started respecting me. And same. Like, for example, there is a situation that occurred where I was crying and she started to talk and say things while I was crying, like trying to console me. Very good intentions, right? Normal person would probably do the same thing. For me, that caused me to stop and then freeze up and could not be able to express or emote like I needed to. So I let her know in the moment, like, hey, I think next time, you were great, thank you, but maybe next time, don't say anything and see what happens. Maybe I can continue to emote around you. So then a month went by, I started crying. It was in regard to my sister. I was grieving. And I was in the kitchen and I'm just starting to cry as I'm doing dishes, thinking of my sister. And she walked in, doesn't say a word, just stands there. And I'm just crying. And I think she might have put her hand on me or something. And then after a few minutes, I said to her, I'm like, what are you doing? Why are you, you didn't say anything or what do you want? And she's like, oh, last time you told me to not say anything, to just let you emote and see. So I was just trying to do that for you. And I just hugged her and said thank you. Wow, you listened to me. And when it came up again, you did it. And I'm watching us, and it's not always perfect. We still, it's not really perfect, but I'm watching our relationship change because I'm now opening up more because what has hurt our relationship sometimes the most is me pulling away and my walls. And I'm realizing now that that's one of my protection patterns is my avoidance and pulling away and how hurtful that can be. I never realized how much it hurt people. And so that was my part. So in doing the work around my part, which was pulling away and not saying what I needed and just being angry and resentful and whatever, since I started doing my work and showing up differently, which was give her a chance to show up for me, say what I need, don't just pull away, right? Stay for connection, stay for explanation. Gave her a chance to respond differently. Now she is. And then now there's healing. So that wouldn't have occurred unless I started changing my behavior first.
Yeah.
Because it's a dance. Like you said, you talked at the very beginning. What dance are you in? What moves are you usually doing? Our partners know, right? They can tell. And so this was our dance, and I decided to change up some of the steps. And
Yeah.
she met me, right? She's like, I want to continue this dance with you. Yeah. So I love that you
Yeah.
use the analogy. I love that that's what you're doing with your clients and
Yeah.
asking them like, what's your dance?
Yeah, and too, it can be really heartbreaking, but sometimes people won't be able to meet you.
Mm-hmm.
And like that's been my experience with a lot of, family stuff is like there isn't like an openness or willingness or even an awareness to meet these moments. And so that can be really heartbreaking, and learning how to, go towards where that is available, right? So go towards like you or other relationships where people are very open for that, but it's just not, and as much as I would love nothing more than to have that with, my family of origin, it's just not possible. And I love them. They do the very best they can. They have their own protection patterns operating. It goes down the line. We should maybe talk about intergenerational trauma sometime on this podcast. But yeah, so these things are just, they're tools. They're things that you can use, and then it really does depend. Sometimes you can make a request, and you can make a request, and it may not be met, right? So and learning how to hold yourself through that when it doesn't get met, even though you did everything you could on your side of the street, right? So yeah, there's just endless areas that we could talk about with this stuff, but I gotta run.
I know you do. I just saw the time. Thank you so
Yeah.
much for taking this time again, Jess, for being open and honest. I really appreciate everything that you do for me, everything that you do for your clients. If you are not currently working with Jess, or you would like to, please, please, please reach out to her, DM her. She is a phenomenal relationship coach. She has helped me so much. She has helped clients of mine, actually. It's really funny. People have seen me talk about Jess, and they've heard me talk about everything she's done for me, and they started working with her too, and now they're thriving. So I'm glad that you're able to be of service to the people that I know. I appreciate everything that you do. We will be putting these up on YouTube. Stay tuned for the link. We'll send it out tomorrow. If you guys need anything, please reach out to us. We love it. The details for us are going to be in the notes for you to be able to DM us or to reach out by email or our websites. So we would love to hear from you. Please let us know what you want to speak about next time. And Jess, thank you, thank you, thank you. I love you. This is amazing.
I love you too.
Go to yoga. Anything else?
Thank you so much. And if you guys are watching this and you're on YouTube or something, share it. Like that would be amazing, because we just want more people to have access to this information. And I echo back the same thing. Teal, I feel the same way about you. You've transformed my life, and Teal's a transformational coach. And so if you need some support in your life and you want to connect with her, I highly, highly recommend her too. So
thank you. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.